What's happening, folks? Back with another reaction, back with another tune from the Lucky 7 soundtrack by Tim Wynn from the J-drama of the same name, 2012, which I have begun doing a watch-along for over on my Patreon. I'm about halfway through the season, though there is also a special episode at the end of the regular season, which is like double long. It's, I think, like 2 hours. And that concludes the story, so yeah, a little bit more than halfway to go. I'll try to remember to put the link to my watch along over on Patreon here in the video description. And we're going to listen to a tune called Stay, which, first I'll say, is remarkably similar to another track in the soundtrack called Open Up, which I haven't reacted to yet. And I think they're actually the same in terms of melody and chronology, but the arrangement is slightly different. So I may react to Open Up possibly for the next one. Maybe I'll wait a little bit because they really are so similar, and then I'll come back and do it after a few more tracks on this soundtrack. But yes, it's very, very similar to another tune on the soundtrack, and I've mentioned the emotional tunes in this soundtrack, which, like a lot of J-drama soundtracks, has some more energetic tunes, some that are kind of light and comedy style, and then a number that are very sweeping and sweet and emotional. The emotional ones, they share some motifs and some melodies, but these two are particularly similar. Again, I think it's only different in the arrangement. Of the two, maybe I prefer this one. Maybe I just think about it first because the term stay, I think, refers to the main character. It's an ensemble show, absolutely, because the detective agency, once the main character Shuntaro joins, has 7 members, and they all at different times are more important or, centrally important to what's happening in a given case. But of the 7 members, I would say Shuntaro is essentially the main character, and his whole character is that, or not his whole character, but a major feature of his character is that he's been a freeter, as they call it in Japan, meaning someone who doesn't really work that much. When they do, they're usually there for a couple months and then they quit because the job is cramping their style, or they just don't want to get anchored down to anything for a long period of time. So when Shuntaro joins, which is sort of on a whim because Toko, the leader of the agency, she asks him, like, oh, would you want to be a detective with us? Because, you've shown a bit of aptitude in the way that you found our agency. And long story short, in the very first episode, the agency was doing surveillance based on a request from a husband who thought his wife was sleeping around. And Shuntaro was sort of ensnared in that investigation because he was the mister of this wife who had been cheating. And he ended up finding where the agency was and, sort of displayed some impressive, tracking skills and so on. So they end up asking him to join. And he's sort of like, well, I guess maybe, I don't know if I can do this kind of work. And a couple other people in the agency at first are skeptical, like, you're probably not going to last here, whatever. And then after a few episodes, there's still this question of, is he going to stay? Is it going to be a permanent thing? But he's showing increasingly that he likes his work and he can get along with some of the members in ways that maybe you wouldn't have expected at first. So I think this track, titled Stay, is reflective of the emotional character of Shuntaro and his, perhaps, finding his calling or finding a niche that he's not going to run away from, that he's not going to quit from over a short period of time. So yeah, let's give it a listen. This is the Lucky 7 soundtrack from 2012 by Tim Wynn, and the tune is called Stay. do love this soundtrack. Take about Tim Wynn once again. And yes, like the emotional character of the show comes through in a lot of moments, both about individual cases and among the members, and perhaps among certain storylines for the detective agency members more than others. And I think Shuntaro is often at the heart of that. And indeed, I mentioned this in the first couple episodes of the watch along I'm doing, but it's like he brings this emotional character to a team. Not that the members before, didn't have feelings or, sympathies toward particular people that they help in their investigations and so on, but Shuntaro brings a personal level to the character of the investigations that Lucky Detective Agency does, and I think it comes across in tunes like this. Though again, with the title Stay, I feel like this is actually, sort of framed around Shuntaro specifically and, what he's been doing in life and, has he found a place and essentially a family or, friends that he can, work with and improve people's lives or help people in need and so on. Which, in the most recent episode I watched, there's a moment with one of the senior members of the detective agency, Tsukushi, who's actually a guy. So if you've seen Hana Yoridango, then Tsukushi there is a female. In any case, he's talking about how, like, the agency, they, even if it's in a situation that has uncomfortable, like, ramifications, or even if it, the target of their investigation might feel like, oh, you're rocking the boat and you're changing things for me or whatever. It's like, yeah, well, the person who asked us to look into this was in dire, desperate need of help, or, they came, looking for understanding, and that's what we mean to provide, and so on. And so I think Shuntaro, because of the emotional nature of his character, I think he, fits right into what Tsukushi was describing. In any case, as I said, this is very similar to Open Up, so I'll react to that one. I'll probably do a few others in between. I think I've gone through, aside from Open Up, most of the really, like, rich and tender, like, emotional tracks. There's a couple others that, like, have a similar feel, but maybe a bit more percussion, and they're, like, a bit more, like, narrative where you can, like, see things happening and, like, during a montage and so on, whereas a tune like this, it's really kind of like an atmospheric tune. So yes, ultimately I think there's, like, one more that's like this, and it's very similar to this one, just a different arrangement, but most of the remaining tracks on the soundtrack have, more energy or, a bit more mystery, or in some cases like this light levity. So yeah, we'll go through it all in the end, but I'm looking forward to continuing with the show. If you haven't jumped on board in the watch along, I encourage you to do so. Big thanks as always to Michaela and to Dawn who've been following, and I will see you for the next one. Peace.